Hello friends, I am Dr. Kuldeep Mohadikar. In this chapter of Literary Pearls, I will be presenting my 27th chapter on Keats' Sensuousness or Sensuousness in Keats. Friends, sensuousness is the paramount quality of Keats' poetical genius. Keats is preeminently the poet of the sense and their delights. No one has catered to and gratified the fine human senses to the same extent as Keats. He is great lover of beauty in concrete. His religion is adoration of the beautiful concrete things. In this respect, he is a follower of Spencer. I quote, I have loved the principle of beauty in all things, he said. I unquote. His endymion begins with the famous line, I quote, a thing of beauty is joy forever. The sensuousness of Keats is striking characteristics of his entire poetry. In the volume of 1819, we have an abundance of sensuous imagery. His senses are more acute than those of ordinary people. He can perceive more than is possible for others. Milton recognized his truth when he said, I quote, poetry should be simple, sensuous, and impassioned. I unquote. All have paid tributes to the sensuousness of Keats. Thus, Matthew Arnold said, I quote, Keats is enchantingly and abundantly sensuous. Keats' life and works bear ample testimony of his sensuousness. In one of his letters, he wrote, I quote, Oh, for a life of sensation rather than of thought, I unquote. And in another, he wrote that with a great poet, the sense of beauty overcomes every other consideration, or rather, obliterate all other consideration. His sensibility was so acute that even a ray of sunlight entering a room would excite his imagination and transport him to fairyland. The humming of a bee, the sight of a flower, the glitter of sunray seemed to make his whole nature tremble. Then his eyes flashed, cheeks glowed, and his mouth quivered. In one of his letters, the poet tells us, I quote, Love is my religion and I can die for that. I unquote. It is infatuation for his beloved was so complete and slavish that Arnold contemptuously calls it the self abandonment of an underbred and ignorant apprentice of a surgeon. Indeed, Keats' sensuousness is universal. No one or two, but all of his five senses are equally acute. Here is multicolored pictured from the poem Ode to the Nightingale. I quote, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles, winking at the brim, and purple stained mouth. I unquote. In the Eve of Saint Agnes, the description of the Gothic window is famous for its rich sensuous appeal. Keats describes the rich colors of the window panes of quaint device, on which stains and splendid dyes, as are tiger moths, deep damasked wing. The reference to the music of the instrument in the same poem appeals to our sense of hearing. I quote, the boisterous midnight festive clarion, the kettle drum and far heard clarions. I unquote. In the Ode to Autumn, the season of autumn is described with a rich sensuousness which appeals to all the five senses. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatched eaves run to bend with apples the mossed cottage bees and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core. Thus, the music and melody of nature, her beautiful colors, sweet smells, and delicious fruits all gives acute and sensuous pleasure to the poet. Equally keen is his enjoyment of the beauty of female body. Feminine charms enchant him. His voluptuousness is clearly brought out from his poetry. I quote, light filled, dark violet eyes, and parted hair, soft dimpled hand, white neck, and creamy breast. I unquote. are things on which dazzled senses rest till the fond eyes forget the stars. Keats is not only luxuriates in physical pleasures but also enjoys particular mental states. In the beginning of the Ode of the Nightingale, we find him enjoying a mood of total lethargy, condition of utter listlessness, in which all mental and physical activity is suspended and the mind takes in impressions. I quote, "My heart aches and drowsy numbness pains, my sense as though of hemlock I had drunk." I unquote. Kids even enjoyed imaginatively the sensation of dying as useful death. He was in love with a painless death. He considered the reach to die, comfortable pillowed upon his pair of ripening breast of his beloved, or listening to the song of nightingale. Keats' sensuousness is universal and all pervasive, and he is the most sensuous of English poets after Spenser. Not only he is sensuous, but also has the unique gift of communicating his sensuous pleasures to the readers. He used such sensuous phrases as warm jewel, melodious plot, beach in green, drowsy numbness, ripening breast, pillowy softness, etc. etc. His senses were acute, and Brindle's point out he communicates his sense impression in corporal plastic forms. In the Ode on Melancholy, we have several sensuous pictures. There is the rain falling down from a cloud above an evening the dropping flowers below and covering the green hill in an April shroud. In Ode on a Grecian urn, also we have sensuous picture passionate men and goals chasing reluctant maidens, the fair youth trying to kiss his beloved, the happy branches of the tree enjoying an everlasting spring, etc. etc. The ecstasy of the passion of love and of the youth is beautifully depicted in these lines. I quote, more happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young. I unquote. In the Ode to Autumn, the born supreme gift of the season has been described with all its sensuous appeals. The whole landscape is made to appear fresh and scented. Each is like the branch of a fruit tree laden with fruit to the breaking point. Thus, there is no denying fact that he is gorgeously sensuous. Critics who have made detailed study of his poetry and evolution of his genius are emphatic that he is not sensual at least in his later and mature poetry. Thus, Finney asserts, I quote, Keats was much more than a poet of sensuous beauty. He was a thinker, critic, and interpreter of life. I unquote. Sidney Colvin writes, I quote, he does not limit the word to sensations of the body of whatsoever intensity and exquisiteness. What he means are infusions of mind and spirit. I unquote. Thus, Keats always select the objects and imagery with a keen eye on their sensuous appeal. This sensuousness is the principal charm of his poetry. Sometimes this sensuousness deteriorates into sensuality. Had Keats lived longer, it is possible he would have achieved a true synthesis of pleasure, of the sense and philosophy, or that as it is we must go to him not for intellectual or spiritual food but for sensuous pleasures. So that is all in the chapter, in this 27th chapter on the sensuousness in Keats' poetry. Thanks, friends.